seeing myself though on my phone talking when I'm right
Especially
here.
when you like live stream to Facebook, so you get like this little delay, you know?
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
little weird.
In case Katie swears.
yeah, in case Katie swears.
When Katie swears.
In Katie swears. It's not a matter if.
Wait, this is a we can swear on this?
Oh yeah, sure, why not? I actually, when I put it on the YouTube
Oh, I
channel,
need to be careful though. My mom is on here, so.
See?
YouTube has the selection feature of is this acceptable for children? And I always click no, and then just cover us from all for possibilities.
Got it. I mean, if something slips, it slips, and I'll just.
Yeah, it's usually Ted. Let's be honest. It's
You
usually
know what? I'll let
It's
Ted say
always-
it first. I'll let Ted go first, and then once he drops one, fair game. Let's go.
Speaking of which, Ted, are we going to get to see your lovely face today?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. There it is.
Oh, there's Katie's.
And my new homemade haircut.
I
Oh.
It
saw.
looks good.
Thank you.
Everybody, May 27th, these locks are getting cut and colored.
What?
Praise sweet
Dude,
Jesus.
your hair's grown a lot.
I know, it has. I'm very happy with this.
Yeah.
The products I've been using have really been helping.
We're talking about reinforcement today. So if Ted gets enough reinforcement for his homemade haircut, maybe he will continue just to cut his hair, thereby saving him some money down the road.
No.
That I could use for who
I
knows?
don't know if that's the message we
Self-care.
want to focus on.
Yeah.
One of the things that's been bothering me, Ted, through all this, just like staring at all your diplomas and your certificates and your licenses, they're all in different frames. I think we need to get some uniformity of framing going behind you. I think that,
No, I think it kind of shows the stages of his life and when he got those degrees.
And Chad, we don't have
Too
my
boring.
fucking height over you, so I need something. You know,
that is
we all
very.
look the same height when we're on Zoom.
So for those of you who don't know, Ted is extremely tall, and I am
6'3",
extremely tall.
used to be 6'4".
I'm one of those people that measures in like to the quarter of an inch, so like 5'4" 3/4. I'm almost 5'5". I'm just there. If I had hair, maybe it would put me over the top to 5'5". I don't know.
On a tall day,
We're gonna keep
5'3".
it
On a tall day. When I'm feeling extra tall.
When God decided to link me out.
Yeah, some days you stand taller.
So good morning, everybody. We're back. We're going to be chatting about reinforcement today. We're live streaming on Facebook. We're recording. We'll go on our cool YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're starting to get a few more subscriptions to it. That's kind of cool. And I
Click
was
the button below to subscribe. Just kidding.
Yes, we'll work on that. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Sorry, keep going.
I was telling Kate when she jumped on that we've rebranded, we've kind of retitled. We've got this cool new focus, broader theme thing going on, which is exploring educational ABA. So we feel like we're kind of special in that we take a unique focus to applied behavior analysis and how it integrates into schools. So that is really going to be a driving factor in a lot of our conversations for sure. But hey, guess what, everybody? Parents, if you're watching live stream, or even if you're a school teacher with a kid at home, now all of a sudden your house is the school, right? Like,
Did you take that from my Facebook?
I did. I'm sorry.
It was so familiar.
It was a
We just posted it.
Called me out. Wow.
Keep going.
Just take it.
Keep going. Keep going.
You're not wrong.
No, you're not. It's so accurate. Like it's like it came out of my own mouth or my own fingers.
So anyway, all this,
Oh.
as Kate pontificated earlier today, all this is extremely relevant to everything, because who knows what's going to happen in the fall. We could be back in school and life could be returning to normal. We could be doing some kind of weird hybrid blended type learning thing where maybe we show up certain days. It could be virtual. But the thing that's going to hold true is this concept of reinforcement. And as we're teaching things, we've got to have a good plan for how we're going to reinforce behaviors that we want. Not talking about maladaptive behavior, but learning and reading and writing and math and transitions and the stuff that we do want. We've been really fortunate the past few weeks to be working virtually with some students over the internet. Kate and I have been kind of working with some, and reinforcement has been this whole thing we've had to rethink, right? Like it looks different now.
Mhm. Honestly, though, I think we have to do a little shout out to the families that are allowing us to do that, because it's super reinforcing for me, honestly.
Yeah.
Like because I just enjoy it so much, it's like, oh, I want to keep going back. And so, shout out to the parents. Thanks, y'all.
Well, it's a big thing 'cause we're so used to working with kids. I know Ted's been engaged with some patients and Ted, what's the appropriate term? Clients or patients?
Oh, they're clients.
Is there
They're
a
cli- when I work in a hospital, they're patients. I'm not working in a hospital right now. They're clients.
Keep me just like Kate, you know, when she calls me out for stealing her stuff, keep me politically correct as well. You are, Ted, if
There's
not,
nothing politically correct about me.
you're like the but yeah, for us as teachers, like working with a kid is actually reinforcing. You know, I think about like this concept of deprivation. I mean, we haven't been working with kids for a while, and we've kind of been a little geeky when we did get the opportunity to start working with them. We're like, oh, this is fantastic, you know?
Yeah, the first time you see a kid on screen, you're like, oh my gosh,
For real, you're
they're
there.
children. Yeah, it's not just, in our
You're
heads.
taller. Your actual size.
Yes.
You've grown so much.
Yeah.
So Ted, with all those degrees behind you, we're talking about reinforcement today.
Yeah.
I think reinforcement is something that is probably one of the simplest things, but also one of the hardest things to understand. I mean, it's just, from a scientific standpoint, from a definition standpoint, it's pretty simple.
It's
But
very
I think
simple.
it's something that people get confused with a lot.
And it's all around us all day, every day. And when it comes to education, when it comes to school, people get this crazy idea that reinforcement is that thing that the teacher has to do right after the student does something. And therein lies the problem, because who has that kind of time? Especially when you have a whole classroom full of students and there's only one of you. And you have to do something every time someone does something right. What are you, nuts? The fact is, for most of us, I have my old man Sudoku and Boggle on my phone. Other people play other hipper games. For most of us, getting something right is a reinforcer.
Yeah.
And just forward movement is a reinforcer. And progress is a reinforcer.
Mhm.
And even that feeling that things are getting a little bit more difficult becomes a reinforcer. Which is why when I'm doing my old man Sudokus on my phone, I don't start with the easy ones. I start with the in-between ones, because I want it to be just difficult enough. I want to be able to get enough things right away, and then figure out a difficult thing. And when I figure out that difficult thing, that makes a few more simple things possible, and so on. And, when we understand reinforcement in these terms, reinforcement for all of us, for every second of every day, isn't an M&M dropping out of the sky or a $5 bill into my hand, although I really kind of like when that comes.
Sounds nice.
What reinforcement is just movement, forward motion. It's getting something right. It's something working. The reinforcement for doing this with the light switch is the lights coming on.
Right. Yeah.
And we don't feel this overwhelming joy. And it's not like the electric company is all right, you guys, Ted's going to hit that light switch at 9 o'clock. You guys better be ready, but it's what happens. Reinforcement. When I turn on my lawnmower, which I haven't done lately, if you look at my yard outside, reinforcement is it going and making all the sounds and everything. And then I keep pushing it forward, and grass shoots out the side and the grass is shorter behind me. This is reinforcement. And in a classroom, what we need to do is structure the work and structure the activities so that there's enough easy stuff. There's enough stuff students going to get right without a lot of effort, with a good amount, not too much, but a good amount of those more difficult things embedded in those things.
Yeah.
So it's like easy, more difficult, easy, more difficult, easy, more difficult.
I
And
think-
that way we all just keep moving forward because we have that reinforcement pulling us along.
Ted, you're like, I've been keeping a list of all the great t-shirt ideas that have come out of these webinars with you. And I love the reinforcement as forward movement.
That's good.
One of
I
the
know it's just a good idea if I wear a t-shirt. You
Yeah,
know. We tried that topless Tuesday thing, remember?
Oh, no, there it is.
No, let's not
No
go
one
there.
wanted to see
There
that.
it is.
that would be really, really
Yeah, the viewership went way down.
one of the
We're
things
up.
start with today is just kind of some of the misconceptions of reinforcement.
So I actually had one, when Ted was talking about that, a common misconception with reinforcement, especially in the classroom. And since my background was primarily in the gen ed setting, and something I often heard is like, how am I supposed to reinforce that? Because every time they thought reinforcement was a tangible, and they always thought it came from the treasure box. And then they're like, who's going to provide these reinforcers? Who's going to go out and buy the gallon size, Skittles or the chips? And it's like, it doesn't have to be that. Just like Ted was saying, the activity, reaching a level of success, or, being challenged to a point where there's still success, but there's still that in-between land. I think that's a huge misconception, is that it always has to come from a treasure box, and that it has to be Skittles and you have to go out and buy it. That's what I've had a lot of experience with.
No, I think, and Kay, I was going to kind of throw this to you. I mean, is everything that we conceive as good a reinforcer to a kid?
No.
No, we usually, there's a lot of assuming that can go on with reinforcers. Like, just because I really like Play-Doh, that kid might really not like Play-Doh. And just because they like something doesn't mean it's actually reinforcing. Because the reinforcer has to increase a behavior we want them to do. So it's got to be, like, if we want to increase the amount of time they will stay at their table, the reinforcer must show that, or it's just a preferred activity.
And give them a reason to stay at the table. Not,
Yes.
you stay there, I'm going to give you a reason to stay there. Not that kind of reason, but
Yeah, that's not good.
make the table the best place in the world, which doesn't mean the floor is going to become lava and you have to be at the table. But, not that everywhere else is awful, but have good stuff happening at the table. Then you want to be at the table. It's the happening place. You want the table to be like that Amazon box on my kitchen table right now, where one of my cats is spending all the time.
Yeah.
It's a happening place. That's where the student wants to be.
Another great.
Because good things happen there. Because the student's successful there. Because when the student sits there, life gets better.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, and I think it's going to be more broad toward applied behavior analysis in general. A big misconception is that there is this assumption that we always want contrived reinforcement, but what we want is the natural environment to be naturally reinforcing, and we're always moving in that direction. For me, and I'll kind of let you guys weigh in on this as well, I see so much dependency on reinforcement, like we almost overdo it sometimes.
And I think that our attention itself can be highly reinforcing, and we can use that as a reinforcer, so we don't have to sit by that kid the whole day. Like, if we're overusing reinforcement, or if they're too dependent on it, maybe we back up a little bit, and then when they do something awesome, we run in and we're like, that's awesome, high five, and then we kind of go back to our, go to another kid or go to another place in the classroom. We don't have to sit there beside the kid all day, but it is super important to know that your presence and your attention can be highly reinforcing.
Well, we don't fade the schedule.
Yeah.
We fade it, we go into middle schools and the kids are like, they won't do any, like the teachers will, first thing, they won't do anything unless we give them Skittles. And it's like, well, we're going to have to fix that, because Skittles are not, like Ted said, going to fall from the sky every couple of minutes.
They're full of vitamin C if you read the label. There's this notion that reinforcement is the koosh ball, or is the thing that running over there and saying, that's great. Reinforcement is also, saying, yep, good, keep going. Reinforcement is being noticed. We have a lot of students. I used to, when I worked at Hopkins and I managed the inpatient side of the pediatric feeding disorders program, we had failure to thrive babies. We had kids who were literally starving for attention, quite literally. That's why they had to be admitted to the hospital. And all we would do is they take a bite of food and they swallow it. Yep, keep going. That's right. Just pay attention while they're eating, because these were kids who learned how to, with parents who had a lot of difficulties of their own, not eat. They learned to get attention by screaming and crying and pushing food away, because and running away when it was diaper change time, because the time when they would get attention, is when the parents would move toward them to attend, is when it was time to feed them or time to change them, because that's all kids need, right? And the kids would sustain that attention by refusing to eat, so the parents have to keep attending, and refusing to cooperate with changing. Well, that's kind of nuts. But here, our attention, just looking, nodding, that's right, good, keep going. I saw that, way to go. That's good. What's also attention, though, for a lot of misbehavior, when we don't do a good job of embedding a lot of reinforcement right into the work, because it's all difficult, 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 instead of easy, 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 difficult, easy, difficult, easy, 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 difficult. When we don't do a good job of embedding a lot of reinforcement in it, is the kid escapes from it, right? Kid rips it up, kid leaves the table, kid does something that kind of gets the teacher to react, and the teacher reacts with words, and the teacher reacts with movement, the teacher reacts with the face turning red and that vein right here pounding. And because all of that stuff is accompanying the kid getting out of the work, even that red face, that loud tone of voice, and that vein right here pounding, they come to function as reinforcers too. We end up reinforcing stuff we don't want to reinforce.
Yeah, and for a lot of our kids, I mean, that's the only time they do get the attention from the teacher. And I think what ABA brings into the schools is this understanding of a broader definition of behavior. Like when we walk into a classroom and we're maybe looking at a student, we see the sitting down as a behavior. We see the student holding his pencil as a behavior. We see the student engaging in the activity as behavior. And when you start to break things down kind of in smaller parts like that, it makes it easier to understand that you have to reinforce those things, like Ted was saying, easy, easy, hard, 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 easy, easy, so that they actually contact enforcement for some of these smaller behaviors. And Kate, what do you guys say? I mean, you both taught in the classroom. We go into a lot of classrooms. What do you guys say when I don't have time for that? I can't do that. I can't just give them attention for just sitting there.
I mean, I think, a big thing that I stress to teachers when I was a teacher, and it's still something that I think we need to focus on, is what's more reinforcing to the teacher, to seeing a student's success, or to seeing or constantly having that blood vessel pop, every 5 minutes. And so, when they say, I just don't have time, and I was like, so you have time. So you're telling me you have time to have the argument with the child every 5 minutes. That's what you're telling me. Instead of the 10 seconds to say, hey, that was fantastic what you just did, and then moving forward. But that's kind of, I think we focus a lot of our attention, obviously, on student reinforcement. But if we shift it, what's reinforcing for the teacher, then it's kind of put in their field, like, oh, what am I, like, we want to change the child's behavior, but what about first focusing on the teacher's behavior, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that when we go into classrooms, one of the things that we talk about kind of retrospectively as we look back and we're kind of learning as a company and learning the application of what we do, is we probably, when we go into classrooms, change teacher behavior more than we actually do student behavior, right? And
yeah.
All that's tied to reinforcement. It's not just about the students receiving reinforcement. Reinforcement is everywhere around us, and those schedules of reinforcement, they really kind of govern how we learn and what we do. And I just want to take a second, just guys, we got several of you in the audience today on Zoom. If you have any questions, we would love for you to keep us on topic, but it's okay if you get us off topic. We can do that by ourselves. It's fine. If you have any questions, throw them out there. We would appreciate getting some feedback from you guys and answering any situational questions you have, or just general questions you have, or any questions about Ted. I mean, he's an interesting guy. We could just talk. We could have one talk about Ted.
I give great haircuts.
We could reinforce him with lots of attention.
Yeah. Bought this T-shirt in Greece last year.
I was there with you. So
yeah, got it in Delphi. One thing that drives me nuts that I hear in school sometime is, it's just behavior. It's not academics, it's behavior. You're not here for academics, you're here for behavior. And what a lot of people don't understand is academic is behavior. If it's a verb, it's behavior. Behavior is anything you say, do, think, or feel.
Yeah.
If it's a verb, it's behavior. And so when we approach the academics the same way as we approach other behavior, like embedding reinforcement in it, which doesn't mean taping Skittles to the page, because kids will break the page when they take off the tape. But instead, again, as I said, easy, 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 difficult, easy, easy, difficult, easy, 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 difficult. When you know, we have enough breaks so that, you know, we're not wearing the kids out, you know, when there's interest in the work itself, because the work produces reinforcement, then my job as a teacher is a whole lot easier, because I get a whole lot less of that behavior that I have to deal with, because the kid is doing the behavior of the academics.
Yeah.
So Ted, you know, when you said that easy, 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 difficult, easy, 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 difficult, my last year of teaching as a teacher, I worked with a student, and it was a general education student, and they said, refuses to do anything. This is all the work they have to do. And I said, okay, give me the current assignment you want them to do, and I will get it done. And they said, you can try. So I took them. So I wanted to, like, I did my little, I did the 10. I was like, okay, challenge accepted. And so, you know, what I did, I took this very boring worksheet and I cut it into sections. Like, so I started off with one worksheet, one question, and I put it in there, and the student pulled out like, this is it. I was like, that's it. First work, then this. And they're like, oh. So they put it away in the drawer. They get the little cue card, because we were working on, you know, appropriately requesting for items. We said, okay, we exchanged, let them engage with it for 30 seconds, took it away, put the next activity in. We're like, first work, then this. And we increased, you know, over, you know, probably every 2 questions, we increased it from 1 question to 2 questions to 3 questions. And I timed it. And a 10-question assignment that the gen ed teacher had put in place to be completed in 15 minutes independently, with reinforcement time, the student completed in 8 minutes.
Well, who has time for that?
Yeah, I'm just like, gosh. And I went down and I was like, here you go, it's done. It's in pieces, but we can tape it together if you'd like. And they're like, how'd you get it done? I was like, I broke it down, and I also provided reinforcement.
Yeah.
Right. And there's always a plan to move away from that. So it's not like we're saying forever someone's gonna have to cut up this person's like work when they go into the office, like someone's there like cutting up their, like, you know, progress reports out for them. Yeah. So there's always a plan to stretch it out, but you have to start somewhere. And as soon as they know they're going to reach reinforcement, that's when you've paired with them. They will listen to you. You have instructional control, and then you can fade out that high level of reinforcement.
Yeah, it's not just knowing that they're going to reach it too. It's also accepting the contingency associated to it, right? You're asking them to do something that's reasonable, proportionate to the amount of reinforcement that they're going to get. And where I've seen kind of teachers go off the track a little bit is they start out really well. They start putting in maybe some non-contingent reinforcement or continuous reinforcement, but they don't have a plan to fade it. And that's where we get our really reinforcement dependent kids. And you see a lot in the autism world. And unfortunately, you see it a lot within home ABA as well. I mean, you get students that are so prompt and reinforcement dependent, they won't do anything without any reinforcement. And that's not what ABA is. That's not our goal. Ted, you want to throw something in there?
Yeah, well, and there we've taught the kid to be rigid.
Yeah.
You know, you got to wonder how much of the rigidity that is said to be symptomatic of autism, how much of that is stuff that we teach kids? You know, it used to be one of the diagnostic criteria for autism was monotone way of speaking. But then if you look at the way that so many well-meaning behavior analysts back in the 70s and 80s and early 90s worked with kids, they would say touch, nose, you know, and if you talk in this monotone way while teaching the kid to follow instructions and to talk, you're going to get a lot of monotone speech back. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to do things in this rigid manner, you do 3 and then you get this, you do 3 and then you get this. One, we're going to get all of that fixed ratio stair step stuff Look it up, folks. You're going to get post-reinforcement pauses. It's not that the kids doesn't want to go back to work. It's that you taught them to behave that way. But two, you're teaching, you're establishing this pattern, and the kid, because you are important to the kid is just doing what you taught the kid to do when the kid is demanding that reinforcement, because you forgot. The kid's just reminding you from the kid's point of view, which is why we got to kind of, not only be a little less predictable in what we do, and some people don't like it when I say that, but I don't care. I like to vary how I ask things. I like to vary my tone of voice. I like to use different wording, and I like to, vary how frequently the reinforcement happens.
Yeah.
We're on a variable schedule, but as well as embed the reinforcement right into the work itself. Let the kid be successful with the work. Let the kid get stuff right.
So I love getting to hang out with Ted. I feel like I really wanted us to meet in person, Ted, but he lets this fire out of things like that I've been feeling as a teacher and have wanted to say, but because I'm at times that meek personality, I don't want to ruffle feathers. But so to also add, Chad, generalization. And I think this is seen a lot in general education, special ed. A lot of times we see students misbehaving within the gen ed setting. And then what they do is either we increase the time that they are pulled out for in the special education gen ed setting, or they're just sent to the special education gen ed teacher because there seems to be success here. And I think that's, thinking back as a teacher, that's where I probably failed as a general education special ed teacher too, which I really promote now, is once we're seeing success in that special education setting, it's important for us to also generalize it into the gen ed setting. And, yes, you may have to have a meeting to do an addendum or change the settings, and it is inconvenient to get parents in, but it's important that the kids don't only reach success when they're with the special education teacher.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
and that's what unfortunately happens. I mean, I loved when my kids came to visit me, but it was there was, especially when I started this journey through behavior analysts, it was am I being part of the problem? You know what I mean? And so looking into it now, that's just something that we need to keep in mind. Hey, they're showing success in your setting. How are you going to have them show success in this setting as well? Because guess what? Once they graduate to the next school or whatever, you're not going to be there. And you shouldn't be. You shouldn't follow this child throughout their entire educational career. They need to generalize.
Yeah, and I think that is, again, just one of those pitfalls that we get stuck in the school systems, that we find something that's working with this IA, working with this teacher, working in this setting, and then we just say, okay, we're going to take a breath, and this is, we get stuck. We get anchored down in this, and the student, like going back to what Ted said earlier, they're not moving forward, right? So when everybody wants this sense of intrinsic motivation, but we stick them there, right? Ted, another great T-shirt idea. I see it now. I'm going to market it, or at least get it for the company. We can start with 1968. We kind of show that evolution of man, woman, and then end up at EBCS as that this educational.
I started in 68. What is that, when you were born? What is this?
Well, the Java article. So.
Oh, still first applied behavior analysis article actually came out in 49.
Yeah, but it wasn't in Java.
Because it didn't exist then. No, Java, nice journal, but still. The other thing, though, about what you were saying about when things work with that one teacher, and so that's what follows the kid, that we think that's what we have to do. There, it's because what we're focusing on and what we're treating as something that can be reproducible, and what we're considering as procedures are those things that we're doing to teach, those instructional procedures. But the relationship that you develop, that mutually reinforcing relationship, that's also a procedure. And that's what you have to duplicate. That's what you have to replicate across people. And so that has to be established with a new teacher. And no, it's not going to happen right away. That's why when even as sophisticated swinging grown-ups like us, when we get together with someone we've just met, there's a little bit of small talk, There's the figuring out, okay, you're okay and not going to kill me. I'm okay and not going to kill you. We can be nice to each other. Okay, now we're friends. Now mutually reinforcing stuff. There's always that part of every new relationship. And so, you know, we kind of ignore that when it comes to kids, and especially kids in special ed. And we kind of expect them right away to be learning stuff, or we say, okay, honeymoon period, or what the opposite of honeymoon period is, I don't know. And, you know, give them a couple weeks, they'll warm up. Well, unless the teacher does a really good job of you know, pairing him or herself with reinforcement, that warming up's not going to happen, because if the kid could already do it, the kid wouldn't be there with you. But I think that failure to generalize is because we don't consider those relationship variables, which are behavior, and it's a matter of reinforcement, because we don't consider those to be part of the teaching procedures, and they are.
Well, and it's hard too. I would think, you know, for first year teachers out there, you know, they say, don't be too soft, but then also build relationships. And it's like, well, what is that? You know, what's that balance? And I remember like first year teachers would come up to me and they're like, how do you, like, what's your balance? Like when you give them this, like this, your teacher stare, they just stop and freeze. How did you get that? And I was like, because they understand that Miss Hazelwood's the giver. She is going to give you hugs. She will give you love. She will give you high fives, whatever it is that gets you going. But also when Miss Hazelwood isn't happy,
But say something else.
Miss Hazelwood isn't happy. And that was like funny. Like it was fantastic when I could like stand in front of my class and I could just stand there quietly and you would hear the shh, shh, shh.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, Miss Hazelwood's standing there. And I was like, thank you for recognizing that. Can I begin now? And they're like, yes, ma'am. I was like, okay. And I think, you know, the other thing was I always made sure that I was stern. And then after I would reiterate, Miss Hazelwood's still Miss Hazelwood. I still love you guys, but we have something we need to get done, and we need to do that now. And it was just something that's, you know, that you have to figure out, especially if you're a new teacher. For all the new teachers out there, it's definitely a weird balance. But
Yeah, I think.
Speak to that, Katie, because I know that you were going through that.
Oh yeah, we all do when you start teaching. And so something you hear a lot of teachers say is like, how do you gain their respect? Since we can't just expect it, because we can't, which we've touched on in past chats, but we call that instructional control, really. And that's how we gain their respect. And it's just like Kate said, we get that through reinforcement. We get that through, they know they're going to reach reinforcement. They also know reinforcement will be withheld if they do not do what they're supposed to do, which is what Chad said. It has to be contingent upon them doing something that you need them to do. And once you have that relationship and that instructional control, we can generalize it to other adults. And so we can do the same thing and pass that instructional control onto an IA or onto the gen ed teacher we're working closely with, or onto the speech therapist we're working with and collaborating with, because they need to respect all the adults, right? Because we can't be with them.
Katie, you're just like the gift wrapper to all my ramblings. You just like nicely wrap it and put a pretty bow on it.
I've got all the bows.
Gosh, I was like, that's exactly what I was thinking and saying, but not so beautifully.
Yeah, I didn't want to just repeat you, but like, yeah, I was just
No,
trying to
it's
think
perfect.
how my brain was thinking about it. But
I love it.
but it's super important that we pass it on, and it can be hard because sometimes there's that one adult in your classroom that just doesn't get along with this one student, right? And you may not always be able to be like tight, right?
This is a wonderful book for that. Look,
There we
it's written by Aubrey Daniels. It's essentially behavior analysis applied to work, applied to people we work with. When there's adults who aren't getting along, well, this is what you do. It's the same thing we've been talking about between teacher and student, but this is between adults.
All right, we need to make sure we send Aubrey a bill for the free marketing.
The shout out.
Yeah, the shout out.
We haven't gotten those sponsor calls that I thought we would. Nike.
You guys, it's got some really good ratings. Nice. I'll look into
Example of, I really think, again, what we see kind of different, a little bit different than maybe a classroom teacher being BCBAs and pushing into the classrooms. When you were just kind of not happy, right? And you had that not happy face, and the students recognized it, you reinforced it. You said, thank you for noticing that, right? Like you're that small reinforcement of recognizing that social pragmatic.
Yeah.
We embed that in everything that we do. And if you think about daily life, like Ted said really early on, it is everywhere in life. There's nothing that we pretty much don't do that we didn't learn how to do through some form of consequence, right? So I think what ABA brings into the educational environment is this recognition, again, this kind of the smaller components that need to be reinforced to get to those bigger skills. And I really think that's a huge thing about what we bring into the classroom. And just kind of cycling around to something that Ted said earlier about making things motivating, right? If you can get to the point where you're embedding reinforcement into activity, like it's just kind of natural, it's naturally occurring. That's where we're working as a teacher, right? We don't want to just keep giving the kids the Skittles. We want to move on to things that are more appropriate, like the grass getting shot out of Ted's lawnmower, right? I don't have to Skittle every time that he pushes the lawnmower. We want to get to some sense of
the worst thing is like when I would go into an observation and the activity was so boring for me, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like no wonder this kid is acting like this. Like I want to get out just as bad. I would honestly be watching him like, how long does this kid have to do it to get out? Because that's what my next move is. Like, it's just like, it's so what you're saying, Ted, it's important that we put in, and everything can't be motivating. And I get that. Like, the SOL test isn't always going to be fun, but it's important that we put things in place and it's not boring, maybe fun, boring.
Yeah. Two things here. One, and I got to write the other one down. Because I'm old and I forget things.
Visual prompting.
I was asked to consult in a classroom up here, in a school division up here. It was an award-winning teacher, mega award-winning teacher. And they were afraid that this student was hallucinating. She was this girl with intellectual disability in a high school classroom. And they're afraid she's hallucinating. She's just zoning out. And I watched for 2 hours. I observed for 2 hours. And in that 2 hours, this student had only 2 opportunities for active responding. And okay, maybe it was an off day for the teacher. Maybe it wasn't typical. But if that's even remotely what happens, my guess is in this girl's history, she's learned you don't run out of the room, you don't go to sleep, you don't leave your desk, you don't engage in any kind of problem behavior because all that stuff gets dealt with. So what she learned to do was sit there and not do those problem behaviors. And instead, she's just doing what she does. She's kind of what we would do in a similar situation. Although, we'd probably leave or I'd pull out my phone and do my old man Sudokus. Well, what she's doing is she's just sitting there, probably daydreaming or doing something else. And then when she's called on, oh, yes, of course. And then she responds right away. But what the hell? Here, 2 opportunities to respond in 2 hours. What that is, we have to recognize that there's always more than one schedule of reinforcement going on.
Yes.
There's the one that the teacher controls or that's available through the task. And then there's all the schedules that the whole rest of the world is controlling. And what's going on there is the teacher has the student on the schedule that makes reinforcement available once per hour. Well, the student's doing what any person would naturally do and daydreaming, making their own reinforcement, right? It's not zoning out. It's just that the teacher was a boring, really boring person who needed to keep things up. Second thing about that, giving a kid a reason to sit at the table. There is a classroom where Maria and I were consulting before all the nonsense began. And he was a brand new teacher who meant well and had a lot of training. And this was, his classroom was like comprised of the students that didn't fit in anywhere else. And so he had the most mismatched kids. Some could speak, some couldn't, some, you name it. But what he was trying to teach them first is just how to sit at their desks. And Maria and I just kind of visited because we wanted to make nice with this person and not come in and say, you're doing this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, because you don't make friends and get things done that way. We also wanted something to be able to reinforce. Where we really got moving was when we said, you know what, we want to help you. we're not here to observe, to report on you, to do anything. We're here to make your life easier. You want them to sit at their desks. Could we help with that? He let us help with that. So following week, Maria showed up with Pepsi and cookies. I showed up with juice and something more nutritious than Pepsi and cookies. Because there were a couple kids who she was asking the instructional assistants, what are these kids like? And that's what they like.
Mhm.
There were a couple of kids working on manding, asking for things. And there were a couple of kids who just needed to work on sitting at their desk. So at first, Maria and I sat at a table with two kids. We just started giving little pieces of cookie, little drinks of Pepsi or juice. They didn't want the juice. They would ask for Pepsi. And we started sliding in demands like, this one, okay, he needs to sign cookie, or he needs to ask for pop for Pepsi. This one needs to actually do a wee little bit of work, an atom of work, and then he's going to get that little crumb of cookie. And what we built up from there is this kid manding up a storm and making choices. What do you want, the juice or the Pepsi? He said, no juice, Pepsi, Pepsi. He wanted his Pepsi. And did you want crackers or did you want cookies? We taught him signs, we taught him to mand, we taught him under the right stimulus control. And we had the other kid not only doing work at the table, but we stretched that out to him following an instruction to go over to his desk, do something there, raise his hand when he's done, and come back over to the table to get the little drink of Pepsi and little piece of cookie. Now, again, this is using a lot of kind of really artificial reinforcement, right? But the fact is, you don't get anywhere by teaching someone to sit at the table unless there's something of value for them at the table. And this was in like February or March. So these kids already had what? September, October, November, December, January, February. 6 months of nothing going on at the table. So we needed to really up the value of that table, which is why we brought in the Pepsi and cookies.
Yeah.
And if this crazy pandemic didn't happen, which isn't my fault, by the way, if the pandemic didn't happen,
we have
I don't know.
we'd probably have the Pepsi and cookies either out of the room by now, or that would be something pushed back to snack time or lunchtime. And the kids are just doing their work and enjoying it. But you got to give the person a reason to be there. You can't just have being at the desk being the goal.
Well,
How many rooms do you guys think we've walked into where we walk in and they're like, it's been like this all day? And we're like, well, what are you wanting them to do? And they're like, I just want them to sit at the table.
Yep.
And what? And they're like, I just want them to sit. That was the task I gave. And it's like,
and do what?
And do what? And you're just like,
do what?
And to be clear, my first year teaching, I was asking the same questions. So we know it's not easy. Like we know it's not, if you've got 8 kids that are all exhibiting many behaviors that might not be what we want them to be doing, it can be really difficult in targeting who likes what's reinforcing to which child. But you learn to make everything motivating. And so when it comes down to, well, I have 2 instructional assistants and I know that these 2 kids don't really get along with this IA, but it's how we're staffed. It's what I need to happen. You compare a fun activity, a more motivating activity, maybe some gross motor activities are involved. They get to like throw something in a cool basket, getting creative with your lesson planning. You compare them with that person and they know that, oh, this person is fun. I do cool stuff with this person, not just sit at a desk and they try to force me to do a worksheet, because that's usually the experience. They're like, well, if that kid just doesn't like me, I can't work with them. They just automatically get up and run. It's like, well, we have to pair you with something cool.
They have to have a reason to be there. And Ted, you really hit on 2 big things that we see so much, especially in our self-contained worlds. And that is the multiple schedules of reinforcement, right? That there is what the teacher has contrived and planned out and thought through, and then there's everything else that happens naturally. But that leads to some of this stemming behavior that teachers identify as a sensory need or something, but because that child hasn't been reinforced, they're kind of just sitting there. We see this a lot with our students with autism and intellectual disability. It leads to some kind of stemming behavior. And if that student is controlling her own reinforcement or his own reinforcement, then you've lost that instructional
Wait,
control.
what did you say? Sinning?
Stimming behavior.
Oh, stimming. I thought you said sinning. Like, is he
No,
coveting his
that's
neighbor's
that's
wife?
a whole other set of behaviors that happen in Vegas. It's okay.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
No,
We
but
Covering
went there.
stuff.
We went there.
It's
like even
yep.
behavior, like if a student's not engaged enough, we're talking about our lower cognition students.
Well, e-
You're going to see some of these automatically reinforcing behaviors come up, right?
Even the higher cognition students. Again, my stimming behavior, doing my old man Sudokus. Your stimming behavior, you lay in your hammock and rock. We all have our stimming behavior. We all have our stimming behavior. And we act like it's unnatural because, you know, kids with disabilities do it and they're flicking things or they're spinning. But the fact is we all do it. For most of us, our stimming is eating, or it's
Yes.
watching TV,
Yeah, check.
or it's reading, or it's, you know, that's why on the bus, on the metro, all over the place, there's text, there's advertisements sold all over everything. Because when we get bored looking over here, when the reinforcement value starts dipping there, we naturally go over there. You know, we access reinforcement there because we're stimming, we're looking, because the train ride into work was boring.
Insert emoji clapping hands. Yes, yes, yes.
About a point that she had one this year that she really had to reinforce just to come work at the table, and I think our mindset, Cami, is give them a motivating reason to come to the table, right? Like pair that table with something that really is engaging. And I always kind of use the example of the dinner table. You know, would you come to dinner for something that you're allergic to, or would you come sit down at the table for something that you just don't like to eat?
Put bread at the table. I'll be there.
Yeah.
Bread and butter.
The dinner table I've paired with good things.
You know, it should be. And I think that's where we go wrong a lot of times. And I know, Kimmy, you're a preschool teacher, and I think about pre-K, and I know when we did the pre-K webinars, we talked about how difficult just the natural transitions in the pre-K world are, because you have so much stimuli in the pre-K environment. There are toys in the classroom, there's other kids in the classroom, you know, there's fun places to do things. And now we're asking those kids to sit down longer and longer at the table, and they associate that with just like kind of a aversive stimulus. And instead of thinking about how long can you get them to sit at the table with reinforcement, like reinforcing them sitting at the table, how long can you get them to sit at the table with something they really, really love to do and just leave them alone?
Well,
you know?
and some kids have such a nasty history of, you know, life getting worse when they sit down, because you sit down for timeout. You sit down, you know, when someone's going to put something awful in front of you and make you do stuff you don't want to do. You sit down in the dentist chair, right? Well, I see nothing wrong with some kids initially having them just come over to the table. And they can stand and do that little bit of something I have for them for 5 seconds, or even no seconds. They can just come and get the reinforcer and move on. But I'm going to want more and more each time. Just, you know, first one's always free. I'm going to want more and more each time. And included in that more and more is eventually they're going to have their bottom in that chair.
Yeah.
First for a second, and then a second, and they do something, and then longer and longer. We build up to that.
I remember, Katie, when I came into your room, I was allowed to go into your room, and it was like when we first met. And I remember Chad asking me that question, asking me, how can we get this student to the table without using words? And I just stood there like, I don't. And he was like, how do you do it? And I was like, why are you asking me such hard questions? And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, grab the train, walk with it so it's visible, and put it at the table. And I was like, okay. And I grabbed the train and I took it to the table, and the kid just
He went right.
and he's like, okay, let him engage in it for like 10 seconds. And I was like, okay. And have the activity ready. And I took away the train after 10 seconds, inserted the activity, did the entire activity with 100% accuracy. And he was like, okay, now give him back the train. Okay. And it was like, and it was funny, like, then this year when I had done something very similar to that, Chad, you were like, I was just so impressed that you did that. I was like, yeah, I was doing a Chad move. And he's like, no, it's now a Kate move. And I was like,
Oh, it's an ABA move.
thank you.
It's a teacher move.
Yes.
We
But
can all do it. Yeah.
it's something so simple like that, where we're like, they won't move. Like they just, you have to talk to them. It's like, but you sometimes don't.
Yeah.
Talk.
That's a super good point. Yeah, we get tired of hearing our own voices all day as teachers.
Yes.
And so you don't want to be like, Johnny, table, Johnny, table. It's like, no one wants to hear that all day.
Why,
Yeah,
why doesn't
and
it occur to us that if we're telling them the 42nd time, because the first 41 weren't effective,
Yeah.
this one's unlikely to be effective too. And what we're doing there, all that work that we have spent or not spent trying to pair our voice with reinforcement, we're squandering it by making our voice be this thing that the kid is just kind of ignoring now. We talked last time about thinking about the student's behavior as an anvil, like from Acme. Oh, Chad, we talked about this with the people in Idaho.
Yeah.
The student's behavior is an anvil. And they're big and they're heavy and they get dropped on coyotes and cartoons. But the behavior is an anvil. Your instruction is you pushing the anvil. And you can push and push and push, and it's not going to go anywhere. But if you have reinforcement pulling that anvil along, it's so much easier to push.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're instructing and the behavior is not happening, it's either because you haven't established yourself as a reinforcer, the kid doesn't have a history with you, or there's free reinforcement somewhere else in the environment going on right there. And sometimes it's reasonable. Sometimes like, okay, let me finish this one thing. I'll be there in 2 seconds. That's reasonable, right? But sometimes what you're asking the kid to do is so difficult because it's the worksheet of 800 really difficult things. Or sometimes it's you've never established the table as a swinging place to be. And so your instruction to go to the table is really going to be just like pushing that anvil.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with providing the reinforcement non-contingently first, just to get them to the table. And like Kate said, they interact 30 seconds, you take it back, you quickly give them an easier task, ease them in, reinforce, and you keep going like that. There's nothing that says they have to immediately sit down and start working right that second, because that, why would they stay? And so starting with something reinforcing or super motivating first at that table, that's totally okay. It's what we would suggest if you can't keep a kid at a table.
Ted, I really bumped on something you said there about, that 41st time of delivering the instruction and kind of merging that with what Kate was talking about, that situation where she just took the train over. First and foremost, there's really nothing complicated about what we do. I mean, when you really break it down and think about it, yes, we are pretty specialized in what we do, and we're pretty good at what we do. But
we have fancy words. That's about
it. Fancy words.
We recognize and understand the governing principles behind human behavior, and we manipulate those sometimes to teach new behaviors and establish new routines and things. So it's not that this is like some magical thing. I mean, you think about the example Kate gave, it really was so overly simple, but
yeah, I felt like an idiot after that. I was like, oh,
yeah,
it was that easy. Like, as I'm like trying to like gesturally prompt, like move this way. Sorry.
We're so wired. And of course that was, all of our background's pretty much in teaching, but we're so wired to tell, to say, go do this. Right. And it almost becomes more of a point of getting our way as the teacher, right? They're listening to what I'm saying instead of us just making the behavior predictable. So when you went over and you controlled the thing that he wanted, you made the behavior predictable because that had enough motivating power for that kid to bring him to the table. And when you think about Ted's example of that 45th, I mean, it keeps going up, just saying it over and over again, time of telling a kid to do something. What has it become about? Has it really become about the behavior that we want the kid to do, or is it now just drawing a line in the sand and you as the adult kind of establishing that you're the adult and getting your way? And you need to think about the priority of the outcome a little bit there.
So I guess where's the question? Like, where's the line that, are we giving people permission to change the modify the task, and then present it at a different time possibly, And then where's the line drawn for compliance, because we have to foundationally have an understanding of compliance. So I guess I feel like those might be questions teachers are asking. It's like, well, they have to do this. So what do I do when they have to do something?
I think that's a great point, but to me, it's the difference between going from counting by ones, twos, and tens, and then leapfrogging over to algebra, right? If you've got a student that won't come to a table at all, that's not the time. That's not where we're working on
the hard new skills. Yeah.
Flying within 30 seconds, which is something that I see in IEPs a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know, like my teenager.
30, and what kind of, within 30 seconds, what kind of objective is that? Hey, the truck's coming, get out of the street. 30 seconds later, second 29, he starts moving, second 29 and a half, the truck runs him over. No, what a sad little objective that is.
Yeah.
Complying within 30 seconds.
But I think, Kate, speaking back to your point, it's not giving permission to special education, we should be modifying, right? We should be changing. I was speaking to a parent, I think it was when you and I were working with, and I was basically just telling her that I kind of make this stuff up as I go along because I'm fluid to the responses that I'm getting from the child, right? And I think that's how we need to be from an instructional standpoint. If we're wired that way as teachers, if a kid's having trouble working through a math problem, we're wired to be very fluid in our response to that. And okay, well, they didn't carry the one. So that's where I'm going to pick up the instruction and support them and prompt them. I'm going to put a little box above it.
Yep.
But we're not so much wired to do that a lot of times with some of these functional skills of just coming to sit down or asking for permission to do something or complying with the directive. And it really gets us off track. And I think
that's where you tie in choice. And that's something that so it's, again, choice, I know when we were being, critiqued with teacher evaluations, they would be like, where did you embed choice in the academic instruction? It's like, no. And I always fought it saying the choice wasn't presented in the academic instruction because the choice is throughout the entire instruction component. And so I think that's important, when we're planning, because you're probably asking yourself, well, Chad, I'm a gen ed teacher and I have 27 other kids. How am I going to do that? How can you plan choice throughout your lesson? That's where we need to be looking at it.
Yeah, and I think that'd be a great thing. We're kind of running out of time today, but I think that'd be a great thing to kind of pick up next week. One of the things I wanted to end on, or not next week, on Thursday rather, is kind of expand more on reinforcement, because I'd really like to delve into schedules of reinforcement on Thursday and how important they are. We've talked so much about different types of reinforcement and wanting that natural reinforcement and things, that when I walk into a school as a BCBA, and I'm more attuned to it as a BCBA than I was as a teacher, I see all the reinforcement for the things that we don't want. We are so punitively minded in schools. The idea that we're punishing, that there is a consequence to reduce a behavior.
Mm-hmm. Despite the positive behavior interventions.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, we can go on a whole tangent.
Sorry.
Positive behavior support is not behavior analysis.
It's not. It should be more mistaken.
It was a reaction and rejection. Reaction to and rejection of behavior analysis.
Ooh.
That's we can talk about that some other day. That's where it came
Yes, we can.
I would love to.
Yeah, let's go.
Thursday, we talk about schedules of reinforcement, also kind of those unwanted effects of reinforcing behaviors that we don't want. And for me, the one I always see is the TDT thing, the therapeutic day treatment, where the student is causing a commotion in class. And the therapeutic day treatment room, gets a bag of chips and gets to play a game for doing the thing that we don't want them to do. And when you look through the entire school environment, you see that so often, that we actually are reinforcing a lot of problem behavior, and we're doing it unintentionally. I think everybody has the best possible motives and mindsets. It's just, it does become this kind of sophistication thing of knowing that we have certain things that we want to reinforce and certain things that we don't. And we need to really target and focus on the things that we do. Ted always gives the example of doing the reinforcement, we're just kind of doing it in the wrong order. We need to figure the right order for everything to occur. And that's where we come in, is we, help support you guys. And We talk about
I think we should say, like, no disrespect to DDT, but I think everyone needs to understand that it's like we all are coming in with our own backgrounds and understandings of the behavior. And so again, I think it really ties back nicely into that whole collaborative approach. You know, one way is not going to be the right way, but it's important that, you know, if I had a fantastic experience with a student who had DDT and they were doing exactly what you said, DDT, whatever, a treatment. And, you know, the behavior was happening, they would remove the student and they would just get to hang out, take a nap, play games. And I was like, what we're doing is we're right now teaching this child by reinforcing them, act like this, you don't have to do this activity and you get to go hang out, you get all the attention you want in a quiet room. You have the choice to take naps, you can play games, you can play on the computer. No. And so I think, like, once I presented that viewpoint to the day treatment worker, they were like, oh. And I was like, so what do we do to move forward instead of continue to create this pattern of reinforcement? And that's when there was a shift.
Yeah, I think that teachers picking which schedules of reinforcement to use with a child is differentiation. That's part of your job. And so that with that collaboration, with day treatment, with any other teacher you're working with, figuring out when to reinforce, what to reinforce, and how to reinforce it that is academic for you. That's part of your job. That is part of differentiation.
Yes.
I think we forget that. It's part of lesson planning for you is to think through those schedules of reinforcement. So.
What I've learned over the last 8 or 9 weeks, since none of us has gone anywhere, one of the many things other than how to give haircuts is exactly what Kate has been describing. This is that therapeutic day treatment example right there. Initially, this guy would sit right next to me and bark until I picked him up, and then he would stop barking. And then he'd just kind of chill with me.
Yeah, we're really bad at that with pets.
He just walks up to me and kind of snorts. And the snort precedes the bark. So I avoid the bark. Before I was terminating the bark, now I'm avoiding the bark by holding him. Yeah. So he's getting access to this. He gets to see you. He wants to see you guys by engaging in that behavior.
Yep.
Well, that's not teaching him to go over there and lay on the dog bed with the other dogs, is it?
Yeah.
I'm such an idiot.
Hey, Ricky usually scratches on the door.
Yeah.
And I just said, you need to be on your best behavior. And I mean, luckily she's been good.
I should have told him that.
I know, it's okay.
Too is as teachers, we're kind of reinforcing our own behavior with that, right?
Mm.
So I have a kid kind of disrupting my instruction. I call administration or I call TDT. They take the kid out. They remove the aversive stimulus from my world. So the next time it happens, I'm less likely to modify my instruction to include the student. I'm just going to call them. And then it gets removed again. And then I'm reinforced again. So it becomes.
And we get all that data. Like you're exhausted, right? Like as a teacher, you're super tired. So
that would be some really good latency data to see, like at the beginning of the year, the behavior occurs. How long does the behavior occur for the teacher to call, like for the teacher to pick up the phone? And then we collect this data, and by like November, is it like the first like 20 seconds probably? That's my prediction, but yeah.
And I know it seems like
we'll take that data with us. Happy to.
And that's not really the intent. I mean, we all approach this. One about us at EBCS is that we all taught, and we've had classrooms. We understand, and so we're able to kind of have this open dialogue with you guys about the things that we see, and it makes us more effective in what we do because we can relate and we can have those conversations with. It's not a place of judgment. It's far from a place of judgment. It's just like, listen, we were there as well. We did the exact same thing, and now
we'd like to save you some pain.
We want to pass the knowledge on.
Yeah, Ted's reminding me. He's giving my cue. So it is 10:34. Thank you so much for coming out. On Thursday, we're going to be back 9:30, 10:30.
This was so much fun. I'm so glad I'm back.
Ted,
I love you.
Hopefully. Maybe Buddy will make an appearance. But we'll expand upon reinforcement and talk about schedules and how important they are. And bring your ideas, bring your questions. We'd love to hear from you and answer some questions. If you don't feel like participating live, feel free to shoot me some emails and we'll answer them that way.
Yeah, you could email Chad because he has that up and available. If you're seeing us on Facebook, feel free to make a comment on this video stream, or you could even send us a message. We have a pretty quick response rate. So
We do.
Spread the word, guys. Let people know that we're broadcasting here, and we'd love to reach a bigger audience. We've now got some people we're talking to in Georgia and Utah and Massachusetts, so we're really spreading our wings a little bit. We're going to start some international webinars here shortly.
And if you're in Northern Virginia or Lynchburg and have counseling needs,
that's right.
like that Evidence-Based Counseling Solutions Facebook page, and you can contact us through that.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for coming out, and we'll see you on Thursday.
Bye, guys.
bye.
Bye. Love ya.